Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're getting into a concept that's really quite captivating, isn't it? It all starts with that old Greek myth, Narcissus, the guy who fell in love with his own reflection.
That's the one. A powerful story. And it gave us the word narcissism, of course.
Right, but we use that word pretty casually. Today, we're going deeper because the psychological reality, well, it seems much more complex, maybe even surprising.
It really is. In psychology, narcissism isn't just vanity. It's more about an excessive self-focus, this kind of inflated self-image, and crucially, a deep need for admiration from others.
Okay.
And it's vital to understand it exists on a spectrum, a really wide one, from, perfectly healthy self-confidence, even ambition, which we all need, frankly,
Sure. Yeah.
all the way over to what we call narcissistic personality disorder, or NPD, which is deeply maladaptive, often quite destructive.
So our mission today in this deep dive is to really try and understand that whole spectrum. We want to unpack the characteristics, look at the different, maybe unexpected ways it shows up, dig into the causes, the impact it has on, well, everything, relationships, society, and touch on the latest research too. The goal is really to help you, our listener, get a clearer picture beyond the sort of pop culture idea of it.
Absolutely. Cut through the noise a bit.
Exactly. So if we're moving past the myth, psychologically speaking, what are we actually looking at? What are those core features?
Well, there are several key traits psychologists identify. First, there's often a grandiose sense of self-importance, like a fundamental belief that you're superior to others.
Okay, grandiosity.
Yeah, and that often goes hand in hand with being preoccupied with fantasies of unlimited success or power, brilliance, maybe beauty.
Right, living in that kind of idealized world.
Precisely. There's also a strong belief in being special and unique, that they should only associate with other high-status people or institutions.
And that leads to needing admiration.
Oh, absolutely. A need for excessive admiration. It's like fuel, coupled with a real sense of entitlement, expecting special treatment without necessarily earning it. And then, perhaps one of the most defining features is a lack of empathy, a real difficulty in recognizing or identifying with the feelings and needs of others.
That sounds like it would make relationships very difficult.
Extremely. It often leads to exploitative behavior in relationships, using others to achieve their own ends. There can also be intense envy of others, or maybe the flip side, believing others envy them.
Okay.
And finally, you often see just generally arrogant or haughty behaviors and attitudes, a kind of disdainful quality.
Wow, quite a list. But you mentioned a spectrum earlier, including healthy narcissism.
Yes, and that distinction is critical. Healthy narcissism isn't a disorder. It's about having healthy self-respect, appropriate ambition, the drive to pursue your goals. It's actually considered a necessary part of normal development. We need some degree of self-focus to function.
Right, to look after ourselves, achieve things.
Exactly. Pathological narcissism, particularly NPD, is different. It's maladaptive. It causes significant distress or impairment, both for the individual, often, and certainly for the people around them. It really damages relationships and functioning.
That's a really important clarification. So it's not just damaging, but it's also, it sounds like it's not just one thing, is it? You hinted at different ways it presents itself.
Absolutely. That's a key point. We tend to have this one image, maybe the loud, boastful type, but it's much more varied.
Okay, let's unpack this, because it's not just one thing, is it?
Not at all. There are distinct types,
Well,
maybe styles. The most well-known is probably grandiose narcissism. This is closer to the stereotype.
right.
These individuals tend to be confident, assertive, dominant. They show that overt arrogance, that entitlement. They can be quite charismatic, actually, which helps them manipulate situations or people.
Ah, the charm factor.
Yes. Then there's a type that often surprises people. Vulnerable narcissism, sometimes called covert narcissism.
Vulnerable, how does that work?
Well, on the surface, they might seem quite different. Maybe shy, insecure, hypersensitive to criticism. They fear rejection intensely, but underneath, there's still that deep need for validation, that self-absorption. It just manifests more defensively.
So less outwardly boastful, more fragile underneath.
Kind of, yes. Fragile, but still intensely focused on the self and seeking validation, just perhaps in a more victim-oriented or anxious way. Still a lack of empathy, still entitlement, but expressed differently.
Okay, that's a really interesting contrast.
It is. And then there's a concept that's getting more attention, communal narcissism.
Communal, like community-focused.
Sort of. These individuals derive their sense of specialness and seek admiration for being supposedly incredibly altruistic or moral or helpful. They want to be seen as the most caring, the most generous person in the room.
Wow. So the grandiosity is about being good?
Exactly. Nobody is as helpful as I am.
Oh.
But the underlying motivation is still self-enhancement and admiration, and they can be quite manipulative under that guise of virtue signaling, you could say.
Here's where it gets really interesting. That variety is something else.
It really is. And finally, there's a darker, more severe form, malignant narcissism.
Malignant sounds serious.
It is. This form involves significant antisocial traits, paranoia, sometimes aggression. It often overlaps with psychopathy, even sadism. It's considered particularly destructive and, frankly, dangerous.
UMass. It's truly eye-opening to see that range, from charismatic leaders to seemingly shy individuals to, well, malignant types. It really hits home how complex this is. So what leads to this? What are the roots? Is it nature, nurture, or, as usual, a mix?
It's almost always understood as a complex interplay, yes. A mix of factors. On the nature or biological side, there's evidence for genetic influence.
So it can run in families.
Studies suggest heritability plays a role, yes. And then there's neurobiology. Research, particularly using fMRI scans, has pointed to some potential differences in brain structure and function.
Oh, interesting. Like,
Specifically, some studies show abnormalities or perhaps reduced activity in brain regions linked to empathy. The anterior insula is one area often mentioned, which is crucial for emotional awareness and feeling what others feel.
so potentially a biological predisposition affecting empathy.
Potentially, yes. It's complex and research is ongoing, but it suggests a biological component. But environment, nurture is hugely important too.
Right. Parenting always comes up in these discussions.
It does. Certain parenting styles seem to be risk factors. For instance, excessive, uncritical praise, telling a child they're perfect and special constantly without grounding it in reality. Or the opposite extreme.
Like harsh criticism or neglect.
Exactly. Excessive criticism, neglect, or even inconsistent affection can be damaging. Childhood trauma, more broadly, is also considered a risk factor.
And what about wider influences?
Culture. Definitely. Some researchers argue that cultural shifts, especially in Western societies, towards greater individualism, materialism, and maybe fame-seeking, that these can foster or amplify narcissistic traits, the whole look-at-me culture, sometimes fueled by social media.
That makes sense. And you mentioned Freud earlier. Any psychodynamic angles?
Yes, Freud actually saw some level of narcissism, a focus on the self, as a normal stage in very early infancy. The baby's world revolves around its needs, naturally.
Okay.
But he believed problems arise if a person doesn't mature beyond that stage, doesn't develop the capacity for healthy relationships and empathy for others. If they get sort of stuck in that excessive self-focus, it hinders their growth.
So a combination of potential biology, early experiences, and maybe even culture. Fascinating. This brings us to diagnosis. How does someone actually get diagnosed with pathological narcissism, with NPD? It can't just be someone saying, oh, they're a narcissist.
No, absolutely not. A formal diagnosis of narcissistic personality disorder is a clinical process guided by specific criteria. Primarily, clinicians use the DSM-5, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders.
Okay, the standard manual.
Right. And for an NPD diagnosis, the person needs to consistently show a pattern of grandiosity, need for admiration, and lack of empathy, meeting at least 5 out of 9 specific criteria listed in the manual.
5 out of 9, like the ones we discussed earlier.
Exactly. The grandiosity, the fantasies, belief they're special, needing admiration, entitlement, being exploitative, lacking empathy, envy, arrogance.
And it has to cause problems, right?
Crucially, yes. These traits must cause significant distress or impairment in important areas of their life, particularly in their self-functioning, like their identity, their self-esteem regulation, and their interpersonal functioning, their relationships.
How do clinicians figure that out?
It usually involves thorough clinical interviews, talking in depth with the person about their history, their patterns of thinking, feeling, behaving, sometimes interviewing people close to them with permission.
Okay.
Self-report questionnaires can also be used, where the person answers questions about their traits and behaviors.
Yeah.
And direct behavioral observations during sessions.
Are there specific tests?
There are assessment tools designed to help quantify these traits. The Narcissistic Personality Inventory, the NPI, is a well-known one, though it measures traits across the spectrum, not just NPD. For clinical diagnosis, tools like the Milling Clinical Multi-Axial Inventory, MCMI, or structured interviews like the SCID are often used to ensure a systematic evaluation against the DSM criteria.
So it's quite a rigorous process.
It should be, yes. not a label to be used lightly at all.
Right. So once these patterns are established, whether it's diagnosed MPD or just significant traits, what's the real-world fallout? What's the impact on people's lives, their relationships?
The impact can be really significant and often quite devastating, particularly for those close to the person.
Yeah.
In interpersonal relationships, it's tough.
Yeah.
You often see manipulation. That consistent lack of empathy makes true intimacy very difficult. Relationships can be full of conflict, sometimes emotional abuse. It's hard to maintain long-term, deep, meaningful connections when one person struggles to see the other's perspective or needs.
Even if they crave connection, their own traits get in the way.
That's often the tragic paradox. They might desperately want admiration and connection, but their behaviors push people away or damage the relationship irreparably. It can lead to profound loneliness for them too, ironically.
And what about at work?
In the workplace, yeah, that can be tricky too. Individuals with strong narcissistic traits might be drawn to leadership roles, seeking power and status.
Sometimes they're quite successful at first, aren't they? That charm.
They can be, but often the focus is more on personal glory than teamwork or the organization's actual goals. They might take credit for others' work, struggle with criticism, and potentially create toxic work environments through manipulation or bullying, sometimes masking incompetence with bravado.
And thinking bigger picture, society. You mentioned social media concerns.
Yes, there's a growing discussion, even concern, about whether certain aspects of modern culture, particularly the emphasis on image, fame, and self-promotion via social media, might be amplifying narcissistic tendencies.
Like a narcissism epidemic? Is that overstating it?
Some researchers use that term, others think it's maybe too strong. But there's definitely research linking higher social media use, especially image-based platforms, with higher scores on narcissism measures. Kind of provides that constant validation loop.
Right, the likes, the followers.
Exactly. It arguably promotes more superficial values, focusing on appearance and status over perhaps deeper qualities or connections.
So, what does this all mean for us and the world around us? If these traits are causing so much trouble, how is narcissism managed? Is treatment possible? What's happening in research?
That's the million-dollar question, really. Managing narcissism, especially full-blown NPD, is notoriously challenging. A major hurdle is insight.
They often don't think they have a problem.
Precisely. They might see the problems as being caused by everyone else. Why would they need therapy? So getting them into treatment and keeping them engaged is tough. But the main approach is psychotherapy.
What kind?
Several types can be helpful, often requiring long-term commitment and a therapist skilled in personality disorders. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, can work on challenging those grandiose thoughts and developing more realistic self-perceptions, maybe improving empathy skills.
Okay.
Schema therapy is another approach. It digs deeper into those early life experiences and core beliefs or schemas that drive the narcissistic patterns. Psychodynamic therapy also explores those unconscious roots and motivations.
Is medication used?
There's no specific medication for narcissism itself, but people with NPD often struggle with other issues alongside it, like depression, anxiety, or substance abuse. So medication might be used to treat those co-occurring conditions, which can sometimes help stabilize them enough to engage in therapy.
Makes sense. And what about new developments? What's the latest research showing?
Well, the social media link continues to be a hot topic. Researchers are trying to understand that relationship better. Does social media cause narcissism? Or do narcissistic people just gravitate towards it? Probably a bit of both.
A feedback loop.
Likely, yes. Cross-cultural studies are also really interesting. They're showing how narcissistic traits might be expressed differently or be more or less acceptable depending on cultural values, say, collectivist versus individualistic societies.
Right, not a one-size-fits-all globally.
Exactly. And neuroscience is pushing forward, trying to understand the brain bases better, like we touched on with empathy circuits, identifying potential biomarkers down the line, though that's still early days.
So lots going on. What about prevention? Can we do anything proactively?
That's a really hopeful area, I think. Education and early intervention. For parents, it's about finding that balance, providing warmth and support, but also realistic feedback and limits, encouraging empathy from a young age, not just excessive praise.
Balanced parenting.
Yes. And schools can play a role too. Programs that explicitly teach social-emotional skills like empathy, emotional regulation, conflict resolution, building resilience.
And for us as adults in society.
Greater public awareness and media literacy helps. Understanding how narcissism works, recognizing manipulative tactics, maybe questioning the relentless pursuit of fame and image that's sometimes glorified, reducing the influence of perhaps narcissistic role models.
Really important point. So as we wrap up this deep dive, it feels like the key takeaway is that narcissism is incredibly complex. It's this wide spectrum,
Mm,
from genuinely healthy self-esteem, which we all need to thrive, right through to these really impairing pathological forms like NPD that cause so much harm.
exactly that. It's not black and white. And the understanding is constantly evolving through research. But increased awareness, better education, focus on early intervention, these things really do offer hope for managing these traits more effectively and maybe fostering healthier individuals and relationships. Knowledge here is definitely power, especially when it's applied thoughtfully.
Absolutely. Which leads us to a final thought for you, our listener, to ponder. Given everything we've explored about this spectrum, from healthy self-regard to damaging pathology, and considering the pressures of our often image-obsessed world, what surprising ways might we genuinely foster healthy self-esteem and authentic connection, moving beyond just the surface? Something to think about.